Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Welcome to today's class. Today, we're going to chat about the basic principles of Pilates and show you how to incorporate them. For the first principle, we're going to talk about breathing, and I'll show you a few examples of how to incorporate the breath work. So to give you an example, we're going to start in a seated position, and you're just going to come into a nice forward flexed position, and you're just going to take a few deep breaths here, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then when you do this breath work, I want you to focus on expanding to the posterior part of your rib cage. So we actually want to breathe into the back of our lungs. All right. So you're going to lean forwards, and I just want you to take a few deep breaths in here. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. One more, breathe in and breathe out. And hopefully you can feel the back of your rib cage expanding. For the next one, I want you to come into a nice lying position and put your hands on the bottom of your rib cage. And for this exercise, what I want you to do is I want you to take a few deep breaths here and focus on breathing in and expanding out through that rib cage. So you want to see your hands move out as the ribs open up during that inhale. Nice, and breathe in and out. Let's breathe in and breathe out. Beautiful. Breathe. Last one, breathe in and breathe out. Lovely. And during this exercise, it's a beautiful exercise to actually feel how that rib cage expands, almost like the bucket handle of a bucket. All right, so the next one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our hands into a diamond shape, and we're gonna put that diamond shape over our lower pelvis. All right, when we breathe in, we're gonna feel how our stomach expands, and then as we breathe out, you're gonna feel how that abdominal kind of lowers down, and then on that deep exhale, I want you to focus on actually contracting that lower abdominal muscle. So when you breathe out, you can feel it kind of popping underneath your hands, and almost like the hip bones are drawing away from each other. Breathe in. And then on that breath out, when you contract that lower abdominal muscles, we're focusing on a small contraction of that transversus abdominis. And almost think about lifting the elevator to the second floor of a 10-story building. So it's a small contraction of only about 20%, and just making sure that we activate our deep core muscles. For the next exercise, we're going to look at our pelvic placement. For that one, I'm just going to keep my hands in the air so that you can see the movement in my pelvis. All right, when we look at our pelvic placement, we can move and kind of rock in between an anterior tilt of the pelvis and a posterior tilt of the pelvis. And you can kind of just swing between these two and get a feel for how much range you have in the pelvis. And then you can come into the middle of those two and find your neutral spine. And usually you'll feel that there's a little bit of a gap between your lower back and the mat. And this we refer to as your neutral position. When we use the neutral position is whenever we keep our feet on the ground and we want to maintain our spine in neutral alignment. When we are going to do an exercise where our feet need to come up, then we'll move into an imprint. And an imprint, we bring the pelvis into a more posterior tilt, where our lower back is flattened onto the mat. And you'll feel that immediately our abdominals engage and your external obliques are connecting our rib cage to the pelvis and maintaining that core stability. And this allows us to protect the spine whenever we're doing more intense exercises that put more strain on the abdominals. For the next principle, we're going to look at our rib cage placement. When we have a look at our ribcage placement, we want to focus on allowing our ribs to move, but without having them pop off the mat. So for an example of that one, we're going to take our arms overhead. And what naturally tends to happen is that we tend to arch our back and bring the ribcage up, which we refer to as a popping of the ribcage. And we don't want that to happen because it forces the lumbar spine into extension. What we do want to do is when we bring it overhead, we want to make sure that our obliques are working to actually stabilize the rib cage to the pelvis. So we're actually going to make sure that those are active, and then when we take our arms overhead, we don't see that popping in between the rib cage. Right, so we're going to just do a few and kind of get the feel. Keep that core activated. Feel how your obliques are working to stabilize the rib cage to the pelvis. The next principle that we're going to talk about is our scapular movements and stabilization. Our scapula are very mobile, and thus we need to counter by stabilizing with the muscles surrounding the scapula. So we're going to have a look at the movement that we have in the scapula, starting with our arms reaching towards the ceiling, and just reaching towards the ceiling, you'll see that my shoulders are moving upwards and my scapula are following. So this we call scapular protraction. And you can just do a few here to get the feel. Nice. The next one is scapular retraction. So for this one, we're going to move the shoulder blades towards each other. And you'll see my hands opening up slightly as the shoulder blades adduct and move together. Nice. Just do a few here and get a sense of that movement. Okay, the next movement that we're going to look at is scapular depression, which is when we move our shoulder blades down. So you're going to reach for your toes and you'll feel how your wing bones follow and how they reach towards your feet. So shoulders neutral and down, reaching towards your feet. Good. And the other one is scapular elevation, which is when we shrug our shoulders. You'll feel the shoulder blades coming along as well and moving upwards. Last principle, we're going to be looking at our head and neck placement. So for this one, we want to come into a craniovertebral flexion, like so. And for this position, we focus on having a peach between our chin and our chest. So not squashing the peach and just lightly squeezing it between our chin and our chest. You can almost imagine like someone is pulling you by a string and forcing your neck into a slight forward position. If you do get a double chin, then that's usually a good sign. All right, so we're going to keep that position, and this is the position that we want to hold whenever we're doing a core crunch, and I'll show you one on your stomach as well. So when we come into a core crunch, what we don't want to see is the neck kind of dragging behind. We also don't want to see a very flexed position of the neck. We want to tuck our chin and keep the neck nice and stabilized, preventing strain onto these muscles in the neck. When we're coming into a prone position, we also want to focus on the placement of our head and neck. So when we are doing exercise in prone, what we don't want to see is we don't want to see overextension of the neck, and we also don't want to see the neck kind of dragging behind and creating extra flexion and tension there. When we come into a prone position, we want to bring in some craniovertebral flexion, almost like someone is pulling you by a string. Right, and remember for this exercise that we'll also be activating the scapula, making sure that they are attached to the rib cage. And then we're going to come up to a slight position, keeping the neutral alignment of the cervical spine. Thank you so much for joining. that was just a run through to help you incorporate the basic principles of Pilates and show you how we kind of bring them into the exercises. So I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in class.